This is the Let's Go Win podcast with your host, J.M. Ryerson.
What is happening, you guys? This is J.M. Ryerson. I have a very special guest today for a special show. It says Tuesday tune-up, but it's not. Today is actually Friday, and I have a guest that he's a close friend of mine. He's been a business partner for a long time, and he told me about something when we were in Mexico on a beach, and my initial reaction is, bullshit, no way, it's too good to be true. He goes, look it up, man. And sure enough, and so Jason Brown is my guest. This is called the ERC tax credit. And the ERC is part of the CARES Act, which was a stimulus package meant to help businesses during the COVID pandemic. So you're probably familiar with PPP and EIDL. They were kind of common last year. That was part of the CARES Act as well. Unlike PPP and EIDL, the ERC is a credit and it's not a loan. And most businesses that had W-2 employees qualify for this credit. And they are on average close to $18,000 per employee. This comes in form of a check to the business owner. So whether you're an employee or an employer and you went through the pandemic, you are probably owed money from the government. Now, this is money that I'm going to try real quick. Jay, are you there?
It must be a Friday. My computer is tired, and we're ready for the weekend.
All right. Well, let's try it again. I was just kind of giving them my tidbit on a kind of a marketing email that I asked just in case this happened. But what I was saying, brother, is this is part of the CARES Act. This is a credit. It's not a loan, unlike PPP or EIDL. So maybe we start from there, Jay, and you can kind of give the history of what the heck ERC is and why the heck don't people know about it?
Look, and I appreciate you working with us on some technical difficulties here, but yeah, if I repeat something you said, I apologize, but let me just start from square one and I'll give you the 500-foot view. So March of 2020, businesses we started to realize businesses are going to be affected. And so the government took action. They came out with the CARES Act, which it's an acronym, Coronavirus Relief and Economic Securities Act. Almost a $2 trillion stimulus package for businesses. Now, there were three ways to funnel that money into the hands of business owners. One was, and I heard you talk about it, the PPP loan. It was the payroll protection loan. Essentially what that was, JM, was 2 months worth of payroll. Okay, you submitted your payroll, you got 2 months worth. It was in the form of a loan. However, if you could prove that you used it for payroll, it was forgiven, could be forgiven. The next way to funnel that money into the hands of business owners was the EIDL loan, the Economic Injury and Disaster Loan. It's not a forgivable loan, but it's very favorable features, right? Like you don't have to make a payment for a year. And then when you do make payments at like 1% over a 30-year AM, so it's super cheap money. And then the third way to funnel that money into business owners was the ERC, right? The Employee Retention Tax Credit. But when the CARES Act first came out, and this will answer your question as why nobody's heard about it, is the government said you either have to do PPP or ERC. You cannot do both. But what they did is they paid commissions to banks, lending institutions, small business loan underwriters, loan facilitating companies. They paid commissions to those folks to set up PPP loans. So who heard about ERC? No one, because the government didn't incentivize anybody to do it. So you as a business owner, everyone listening that's a business owner, their bank was calling them. These third-party lending institutions were emailing and calling, and it was everywhere. And so you've been to a fish hatchery before, JM, and thrown a handful of food in the water. What happens?
The attack mode, man.
It's just attack mode. That's what happened with PPP. And if you remember, it only lasted for about 2 months because the money ran out. Like it was this frenzy because business owners, number one, needed it. And number two, that's what it was there for. And of course, lending institutions took full advantage of it. Tens of billions of dollars were paid out in commissions for setting up PPP. Well, guys, let's fast forward to the end of 2020. They've done two rounds of PPP. Almost everybody that had even a corporation heard about it. And if they qualified, they took advantage of it. Well, the government at the end of 2020 is like, look, no one has done ERC. Literally no one. Okay. Because everybody did PPP and you could not do both. All of this money was already allocated. They're not going to send it back, right? They're not sending it back to the taxpayers and redistributing that money. It needs to be sent out. So guys, they widened the funnel, right? They re-legislated, they changed the qualifications. They did a few things. Number one, they increased the amount. Okay. They said, listen, for 2020, it was $5,000 per employee for the year. They said, let's give people more incentive. We really want this ERC money out the door. Let's change it. They can get up to $7,000 per quarter per employee for 2021. So again, now we've more than quadrupled the amount of money that a business can qualify for. They also lowered the qualification for 2020. Now, I don't want to get too technical on this. I know we're just trying to give a broad brushstroke, but for 2020 to qualify for these ERC funds, you had to have a 50% revenue reduction on gross receipts over the same quarter in 2019. They look at 2019 as the base, right? That's the base metric. So you got to take that same quarter, jump to 2020, and if you had a 50% reduction, you qualified. They said that's probably too much. Businesses were affected that had less than a 50% reduction. So for 2021, let's say it's a 20% reduction over the same quarter in 2020 or 2019. And then the third change they made at the end of 2020, JM, was probably the biggest, is they said, even if you did even if you did PPP, you can now do ERC. And so at that point, we threw some food into the fish hatchery water, right? Into the small business water, where it's like, oh my gosh. So essentially, we have another round of funds available to business owners. Okay. And so now let's fast forward a few months into 2021, where they still not a lot of people taking advantage of it. Number one, nobody was incentivized to help you get it. But number two, maybe you didn't see a 20% revenue reduction, but didn't mean you weren't affected. And so they came out, James, and said, listen, if you're affected by a full or partial shutdown, if you own a restaurant and you got shut down, or you couldn't, maybe a partial shutdown, you had hours restricted, or you had to take out half your tables, you couldn't do business as normal. You were in a business where the way you conduct business was in meetings in public places, and you couldn't go there because the place you conduct the meetings were shut down. You didn't have access to your clientele. And then they added one that's a little more subjective, which literally widens the funnel to almost every business. Was the way you conduct business affected by someone else's shutdown that might cause a supply chain issue? For example, you're a construction company, you're a contractor, you build homes, you couldn't get concrete. You weren't shut down. In fact, maybe you're having a record year, like most people in construction and residential home building are right now. But guess what? You are affected because you couldn't get concrete, you couldn't get rebar, you couldn't get lumber. Other industries that had restrictions and shutdowns, maybe port closures, couldn't get products in because of government mandates, your business was affected. You now qualify for ERC funds.
Wow. That's remarkable, brother. And again, my mind goes kind of crazy, but I guess the best thing I would say is, because I know someone close to you, very close to you, actually, you were able to help just because you told them, right? And so I think what I want to do, I'm going to post a link in the comments. Now, you talk about shutdown, Facebook shut this video down. I don't know why, right? So what we thought was going live is on LinkedIn and it's on Twitter. So those folks are hearing it, but I'm just throwing that out there. If you expected to hear this on Facebook, my apologies. You'll have to see the recording. But I'm going to put the link in there, brother. Anything else you can share where you're like, hey, this is the best way to just find out if you would qualify? Because again, my initial reaction is it's too good to be true. And actually I can't even put up the damn link. So I'll figure out how to do that later. But what would be the best way for them to, reach out? I'll say reach out to info@letsgowin.com and we'll filter you over to Jason or one of the professionals. But is there any other way, Jay, that you would kind of say, hey, if you might be owed money, here's how to go about that?
So, yeah, let me just on a couple things you said, and then I'll get right to, hey, where do I go to get more information? When I first heard about this, I was just like you. I'm like, what? This just sounds too good to be true. We're talking $5,000 per employee for 2020, up to $7,000 per quarter per employee for 2021. Now, guys, the program stopped after Q3. So for 3 quarters of 2021 and all of 2020, you can get up to $26,000 per employee. So you mentioned somebody close to me. Look, one of my family members, my sister, owns a shop in the mall, a retail shop. The mall was closed. The mall reduced hours. Even though she had to pay full rent, which is another story, she couldn't do business. So I called her. I said, have you heard about this? And she said no. And who did she call as soon as we hung up? I'll give you one guess. Her accountant. She called her CPA. And guess what her CPA told her? Oh, you don't qualify because you did PPP. And I talked to our accountant and they said, oh, you wouldn't qualify because you didn't have a revenue reduction. Look, those were correct until legislation changed. The CPAs are just not really in their lane. And so as soon as I told my sister, no, things have changed. You had partial shutdown. You had supply chain issues. You did PPP. Now you can do both. She called her accountant back. Her accountant did 20 minutes of research and goes, oh my gosh, he's right. You now qualify. She had 3 employees. She's getting $69,000 check back. So just awesome. It's just awesome. It's not a loan. It doesn't need to be paid back. It's not a grant. A grant, they tell you how you have to spend the money. It comes in the form of a check. And you can put it in your business and take distribution. So anyway, go ahead.
No, it's remarkable. And again, I could go on for hours as I did with you in Mexico, asking question after question. Here's what I think the best is, because not everybody's going to listen to a 45-minute podcast. We're at 15 minutes already, if you can believe that. Info@letsgowin.com, you guys. I will also link a link in Facebook when you watch the recording. But Jay, any last parting comments? And I just want to thank you for the time. Technology challenges be damned. We got this thing done, and we're going to help a lot of people with this.
JM, let me leave you with this, because if I'm seeing this for the first time, I say, where can I go? What can I do? You have 0 to lose, right? Go to the link in the description that JM's going to put on here. You can look at the FAQs, watch the short video, but then there's a button that says begin qualifying. And actually, that's just a questionnaire. It's just a questionnaire, JM, that your business owners will go through, and it asks some certain qualifying questions about their business. It's nothing invasive. They're not putting in any kind of EINs or socials or anything like that. But if they answer a question that would disqualify them, it'll tell them, hey, you don't qualify. But at the end of this questionnaire, it will give them a very, very realistic analysis and says, yes, it looks like you would qualify. And based off what you plugged in, here's roughly how much you would qualify for. They still haven't made any commitment. At that point, we'll send them an email with the documentation that's needed to put together the packet. And there's not a lot of moving parts to it. It's a detailed payroll report and a 941 tax form. We will work hand in hand with them to get that documentation. And then our team will scrub those documents and come back to them with an exact dollar amount that they qualify for. And then it requires an e-signature from them to say, okay, let's move forward. We submit it to the IRS. That whole process usually takes 3 to 5 days. Now, just the last thing I'll leave you with is the IRS. There is a pretty big backlog on actually getting the check from the Treasury, right? So, they're claiming right now about 16 weeks. So you're looking at maybe 4 to 5 months to actually getting the funds. So JM, I guess my last parting words is, what do you have to lose? Go check, go fill out the questionnaire, see if you're owed something, because it's a game changer for most businesses right now.
Well, brother, I appreciate it. And again, we may do this again next week if I can grab you. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties with live, but I will tell you guys, I was at a business event last night. This very subject came up, and there was another gentleman. So out of 20 some odd in the room, 2 of us even knew about it. And it just goes to show there is money owed to you. And it's not like the government's creating it. It's already been spent. And that's the biggest thing when I ask questions. Jason's like, the money's been spent. It's literally sitting there for you. So go check it out. Jay, I appreciate you, man, so much for being here and sharing it. You are going to help a lot of people, as you did your sister and so many other business owners out there.
Thanks for having me, JM. And man, I would love to have maybe on the podcast, we can spend a little more time, go into a little more depth, but thanks for helping us through these hurdles, and we appreciate all you do, man. Love your show. I
appreciate it. All right, you guys, check it out. I will link it. I'll put it on Facebook. It'll be up live on Let's Go Win podcast next week. So if you didn't get it, share this and info at letsgowin.com. There's a link. I appreciate y'all. Remember, your mindset matters. We'll talk to you next week. Thank you so much for listening. If this content is delivering value to you, please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review us. That helps us build this community, and that is what we are all about. Building this community as big as we can, helping as many people as we can, and deliver as much value as possible. Be sure to head over to letsgowinpodcast.com for information on my coaching courses, and make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Let's Go Win 365. Let's go win and transcend in life.
This is the Let's Go Win podcast with your host, J.M. Ryerson.